Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Sportszone here. I'm the legend. Along to my right side here is Lars, and my far right is Windmill. And this is a show that's dedicated to the die-hard fantasy football players out there and drafters. And what we try to do here is try to give you ideas on how to draft a team, things to look for, things to be aware of, to give you the best insight out there to hopefully prepare yourself for the best team out there. And we're going to start it off today with Windmill giving us some ideas on what to look for in the draft and really how to set up your own fantasy football league if you're interested in forming one and getting into one.
How you doing? The three of us are all in a fantasy league, and we've enjoyed it for quite some time. The first thing that you want to do is to determine how many teams you're going to have or how many general managers. And most of the time, that's going to be 8 teams, 10 teams, even 12 teams. You want to make sure it's divisible by 2 because it's going to make it a lot easier on your scheduling. We're a 16-team league, which really makes it interesting.
And that's really about as high as you really should ever go with 16. You should never try to get it higher than that because I think
how many teams do we start out with in our first year in our league?
8 teams first year.
8, yeah.
And then we've grown 8, 10, 12.
The one thing we're trying to point out is I don't think you should ever go over 16 because then you won't be able to draft from anybody out there.
Well, another thing too is with the 18-week league season now, you can go through with a 16-team league and you can play everybody else once and then still, or not quite once, and then still have enough time to get your playoffs.
Definitely.
Exactly. The next thing that you're going to need to do, and probably the most important, is determine who the commissioner is. In our league, it would be Ledge and myself. And what the commissioner is responsible for is basically making sure that everybody gets their roster in during the week and that all the points are given to the proper players.
Definitely.
And with the league as spread out as ours is, ranging all over the cities, it was nice last year. We had fax machines. We could fax stuff back and forth rather quickly. Because otherwise you end up at the end of the week before you realize what everybody else has done. So now, it's a good thing to have all your stats updated and distributed Tuesday morning and Wednesday if you can.
That's correct. And then after we determine, if it's 8 teams or 12 teams, after you determine who your commissioner is, you may even want to have a co-commissioner in case if you have to deal with things also like ties in your league, which we had to deal with last year. You want to decide as the commissioner if you want to include ties or eliminate them. Then what you're going to have to do is determine the scoring method.
That's right, and the scoring method, there's 2 methods that we're going to talk about. There's the performance point method and the basic scoring method. Now the performance point method would be if you had, say, Thurman Thomas as your running back. If he scores a touchdown from, say, 0 to 9 yards, it's normally a 6-point play. But in the performance point method, if he was from 10 to 39 yards out, that would be 9 points. And even if he was 40 yards, it would be 12 points. And I guess we choose not to score that way. We would rather use the basic point scoring method. And the reason that we do is that we feel that the performance point method does not really simulate the way that the NFL is. They don't give extra points for those extra features.
Right. You can go 85 yards or 5 yards, and it's the same on a football game at 6 points. So we do it the same way that way.
And we don't award anything for 100-yard games or 300-yard games either.
Because they don't either. And not only is it, we're doing it the way the NFL does it, it's a lot easier for the commissioner, it's a lot easier, there's never any of these discrepancies and you're filing through papers. If the guy scores, he scores, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. So it makes it pretty...
Well, plus there's another possibility of having an error in there and trying to calculate that too. Because we found with our Prodigy last year, didn't you have errors come through down
there?
There
were errors that were downloaded on Mondays. And so I would wait until, actually Tuesdays there was an error, and I would wait until Tuesday evening to finally make sure that everybody that had downloaded and called in had got the right information out there.
Got all the bugs out of there.
Got all the bugs out, yeah.
I think the next thing you're going to do after you finally determine if as commissioner, once that's elected, and if you do go basic scoring or performances, basically how many rounds of the draft you're going to have. I mean, are you going to want to have 10 players, 15 players? And also are you going to be able to, draft new people and make trades, or is it just going to be a locked-in draft? What we do in our league, as you guys know, is we basically just get in there, lock it in. We take 20 players last year. This year, I believe we're going to go to 22.
22.
Which is kind of deep, and you really got to know your depth charts.
But you have to be deep because we don't have any trades allowed.
Exactly.
In other words, in our league, if you had 2 kickers and both kickers were either cut or injured, now you don't even have a kicker. So you have to be really careful to make sure trying to find like a Chip Lomil or a Pete Stoyanovich, so a guy that's going to be durable and going to be there for you. You don't want to start getting these Ian Hallfields and guys that are suspect being cut, because then next thing you know, you don't have a kicker around.
Well, and then we have a guy like you drafted 3 kickers last year, and
got to cover yourself.
Some teams didn't have a kicker either.
Well, you got to do that once in a while, and the thing you have to remember, especially for the younger sports fans out there, when you're getting in the draft, you want to get in there, and you really want to. You're out for yourself. I mean, you're out to win this thing. That's why you're at the draft. You want to try to hurt the other teams if you can by taking key players, especially if they're a weaker kicker. You might want to bulk up on another one just to eliminate that guy and hoard those guys.
Because there's only so many kickers around, and when you have 16 teams, the mathematics tells you there's not going to be enough kickers to go around.
Exactly. You want to have a game plan going into the draft, and obviously the ideal thing would be to have, from every position, one of the top 6 players, but having 16 teams, that's, it's basically impossible, providing the 16 people know what's going on in the draft. But if you see the guy to your right or your left in your draft week at a point, for example, kicker, take another guy like a Chris Jackie or Fuad Revez or somebody and gobble that guy up, so that guy is kind of short-handed there.
Well, that brings up a good point, though. The one thing that you don't want to do is if you see the draft all of a sudden starting to swing toward kickers or wide receivers or quarterbacks, you got to stick with your game plan. You can't sway from that.
Don't be influenced, in other words.
Exactly.
And plus, it's another good chance. If there's all of a sudden a run on kickers, that means there's going to be some wide receivers and running backs slipping farther down that are going to be good players for you that you can pick up
correct.
too.
But the natural instinct is to try to go with what everybody's running with.
Well, like last year, tight ends went on a run, and it happened to be just past me, so went all the way back to the top on the draft picks and back to me. They're all gone by then. I said, well, why waste a pick early in the draft picking a tight end that's probably the 15th tight end on the list?
Exactly.
It's not going to get me anything. And then last year, what was really kind of funny is we had a couple guys, draft guys that we knew were either retired or had been cut or whatever. Total dead silence in the draft room. Everybody just goes, hurry up, somebody else picked for this guy, realizes this guy's not available.
Yeah,
this
you
year.
want to make sure you do your homework before you go there, because it's a long season. It's over 4 months, and now that it's being 18 weeks with the 2 bye weeks.
Free agency.
Right, you have to get in there now. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you adopt some rules and some bylaws, just so you have to decide on things. For example, if there is a tie, do you go to your whole roster or not? Last year we just accepted the tie, and I guess this year we went with the
Last year we
tiebreaker.
didn't accept the tie. We used the total team points, not only the ones that we had on the roster starting, but also the bench points to determine who the actual winner would be to avoid that. But I think in the spirit of the game, as close as the contests were, this year we're going to probably go back to the tie system.
Right, what we'll probably have to do is vote on it. We both want to go that way, but having 16 people, you always want to be fair and have majority always rule. So we'll vote on that.
Well, that hurt me 2 years ago because I had 3 ties.
Oh, I know.
I was the only guy that had 3 ties in the league, and it actually knocked me out of the playoffs because I would have won 2 of
It can work for you
those
against that. When you have 16 teams,
But then
somebody's going to
call your roster in.
Well, hey, I did real well for not calling my roster in too. For the season that I drafted Dan Marino and Steve Young in the first 8 weeks of the season, I flip-flopped on prospect, forecasting, Dan should have a good week this week, and it ends up Steve Young has the big week. I did that
just
8 weeks in a
row the
row.
whole time if you ever have a team.
I would at least won half the games.
Next thing I do is for the people that are starting a league, they're probably wondering how to determine who drafts first in the league. You're going to want to do is, you can do it a couple ways. You can just get out, like if there's 10 people, get out a ace or 10 of spades and you draw a card. Usually what we do is we go up to number 10. If you pick 10th, then you pick 11th, and you go backwards the other way. I have talked to some other commissioners that do leagues, and what they do is they draft for every round. In other words, they take those 10 cards and they pull them out for every round. It seems kind of like a nuisance. Well, the reason we do it that way is you can kind of sit in a round circle, and you can go back, and then you can just kick it around both times.
So you go 1 to 16 in our league, and then you go back from 16 to 1. And that's not going to hurt the guy that's out on the end. If you're just drafting by round, then the first 4 or 5 picks definitely have the advantage.
Right.
So you want to try to make it,
We find it more fair and a whole lot easier to conduct a draft, too. When you're talking about 220 to 250 players being drafted, it's just a lot easier that way.
If you can't draft in the first 5 picks, I'd much rather be 10th, 11th, 12th, because then you get 12, and then you come back again. You get
easier to pick up a tandem.
Exactly.
A lot easier.
You can pick up 2 of the top 20 players rather than 1 out of the top 32 players.
Exactly. But remember, last year, Scotty, who won it, drafted first. So
This is true.
you got to remember that. Okay, let's go to like personal views on some players. We're going to give you some people out there some ideas on some sleeper picks, some of our personal favorites out there, and who you should look for out there, who you should be aware of, and some key rookie people.
We should talk about free agency too. Jeff's got a list here of players that become key free agents this last year and changed some teams, and that's going to tie in pretty heavily to our draft too.
No question about that. Let's go to personal views on some players here. Who do you think are some good sleepers out this year for the fans out there?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Willie Davis of the Kansas City Chiefs. He really came into his own last year. He had floated around a few camps for several years, and he's going to be Joe Montana's go-to.
You like him?
I really like him.
Who do you like there, Lars? Big-time sleeper.
After reading the paper this last week, they say, not myself, but they say Jake Reed's going to have a real good year this year. He had a vision problem last year.
I was reading that, yeah.
In the trib, yeah. He's got a vision problem, or he couldn't, one eye kind of lagged behind, and it was really kind of interesting to see how he had to do eye calisthenics too.
Right.
And
he's really not built like a wide receiver. He's kind of a big guy, and he has blazing 4.4 speed. So
that's one of the D-backs said he was built like a tight end. He's like, what, 6'3", 220.
See that guy barreling down you, coming across, and I'll run you over like a freight train. That's no good for that cornerback there.
But my favorite sleeper this year as a rookie would probably be Curtis Conley out of USC. The Bears drafted.
Okay.
Who just got injured the other day.
Yeah, but.
Well, he can always come back from injury.
At least it's not Terry Allen with a torn-up knee again.
Yeah. I like, personally, Garrison Hurst. Too bad the guy hasn't signed yet for Phoenix, but I think with Phoenix getting rid of Johnny Johnson and also the acquisition of having Gary Clark out there, hopefully Chris Chandler now has really have some confidence.
Chris Chandler and Steve Berling.
Well, and Rosenbaum's still on team. He's still
He said he went back to the farm.
He's out roping goats, isn't he?
Well, he may come back. You know, that cash is out that they can always jump back in town anytime.
Yeah, like Gary Zimmerman will be back too.
Well, we'll get to Gary later. But
who else you like?
Well, I like Garrison Hurst a lot. For some reason, I've always liked Phoenix, and
we know that.
We know that. He took 5 Phoenix players last year.
Yeah, I did.
One thing that you want to do is make sure that you're sober when you're drafting, because you may wake up the next morning.
Yeah, they say don't drink and draft. You can party afterwards, but make sure you go there and.
You just don't want to do that.
No, you don't want to do that because it can.
Victor found out.
Well, it can be a long year, and you don't want to go in there and. Anyway.
I'll tell you who I really like, and I'm high on the entire Ram offense this year. Ground Chuck Knox has been in there. He's back for his second year. David Lang, I just saw in the paper, is out now for 8 to 12 weeks. He was their go-to guy with 6 touchdowns last year in short yardage situations. Bettis is 240. He's got big size, bulk. They've all
Out of Notre Dame.
Short game team. Cleveland Gary's always been prone to fumbleitis. He's in, he's out.
Well, the Rams have always had a trouble running back with fumbleitis.
That's right.
They haven't got a running back that's been able to hang on to the ball.
But Robert Delpino is gone.
There was something about the soil there or something.
Delpino's gone. He's over in Denver now.
Denver. There's a good team. Rod Bernstein.
Yeah, Bernstein being back there with Elway, I think they're really going to be a force.
With the new coach too, Elway could throw 30 touchdowns this year.
Well, I mean, not only does he throw them, he has the capability of running them in. And then when having Bernstein in your backfield, and that guy can score from 3 yards out on any defense in the league.
He scores from every position too.
The guy's. I like Rod Bernstein a lot.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, he's a very good player too, and I think after coming back from the shoulder deal he had last year with that small injury, I think he'll do really well this year. I like him. I would look for Rod Bernstein. I'd also take a real good look at Miami. I think with having Irvin Fryer and Keith Jackson, now they went out and got Keith Byers. I think Marino.
Mark Ingram.
Yeah, Marino is going to have a year that's.
It's going to be a field day for Marino.
May see the shades of old where he threw 48 touchdowns.
You could.
It's possible.
I think things that I personally would be aware of to give you guys some insight on we're not homers here. I mean, I don't dislike the Vikings, but they definitely have a very, very strong defense. And I think with the way Green Bay's really shored up their defense with Bill Moss, Reggie White, having Buckley back there at cornerback, I would really try to stay away from anybody in the NFC Central except for Barry Sanders. But other than that, I wouldn't draft anybody from Tampa Bay, Chicago, even the Vikings. Because
I think to expound on that, though, you don't want to go with a home favorite on your draft team because it's just going to hurt you. You want to stay with players that you know are going to perform and provide. And, hey, Chris Carter, who, the ledge here had last year, was outstanding the first 6 weeks.
And he broke his collarbone.
Broke his collarbone, never came back.
Now remember, in our league, you can't get the guy either.
Of a heartbreak, you know. And we don't have trades. So once a guy goes down, you've now got to go to your bench. So you really got to do your homework and make sure that you have your bench strength. And these guys probably laugh every time I come to the draft. I have pages and pages, but I've been second and third respectively the last 2 years.
Well, that's good too. I mean, obviously, the more work you do, just like anything else, preparation is really the key. And like we said, make sure you put your time into doing that.
And don't gamble early like I did last year.
Never gamble in draft. Stay with your game plan. That's one thing we really want to stress here. Stay with the game plan.
Emphasize, stay with your game plan.
And try to take the best player at every position that's available. Even if you have an extra wide receiver, take another one, because with injuries and stuff, you're going to need to shore up that position. And as we talked about earlier, we have a major movement on the free agency, and we'll kind of get into that next year, guys.
Who else can we think about here? Mark Clayton in Green Bay.
Mark Clayton, yeah.
Well,
the Marks brothers. Mark Clayton went to Green Bay. Mark Duper just signed with Cincinnati.
Speaking of Cincinnati, who's going to be their quarterback this year?
Klingler's got the inside, but Schrader now was moved, talking about free agency, Schrader from the Raiders is now over to the Bengals. He's fairly washed up, but maybe a new life will work for him.
They've lost Tim McGee now, too.
Tim McGee went to the Redskins.
And then from Cincinnati to the Jets, I believe, with Boomer.
Yeah, Boomer. Boomer should have a good year. Having Johnny Mitchell at tight end and Charcoal Burkett there.
Charcoal, yes, Chris Burkett.
He's
a free agent, too. And he's still on their squad. The most interesting thing I've found with the free agency this year is that the correlation I've seen is that all of the free agents have gone within their division.
Over half, yeah.
Bobby Hebert with New Orleans, now with the
quarterbacks.
Yeah, they just swapped. That was pretty good.
Now over to New Orleans.
Yeah.
Go over to the AFC West. Gaston Green with the Denver Broncos, now he's with the Raiders.
And look at Bernstein, Denver.
Denver to the Raiders. I don't really understand why
from San Diego to Denver.
From San Diego to Denver. Yeah, I don't really understand the correlation, why you would, go within the division.
I don't understand
free
either.
agency, they can money.
Brian Habib. I mean, come on. Who was he before last year? And does he deserve that kind of money?
Well, I don't think anyone deserves that kind of money, but
Thurman Thomas.
That's a whole other show.
Thurman Thomas, $4 million a year, and now Emmett probably won't play this year because of that.
No.
What's your views on signing a contract, Victor?
Well, on the deal with Gary Zimmerman, I mean, if you're signed to a contract, in my opinion, you should report there.
You should fulfill it.
And it's none of this, I want to renegotiate because so-and-so made more money. I mean, if you have 10 people out there in the world, you just bump into them all, they all have 10 different incomes. That doesn't mean that because you're fifth or sixth out of those 10 that you should be paid as much as the first person. You can renegotiate that down the road. Like the deal, for example, with Rich Gannon, $1.45 million signed this year. He's getting over $90,000 a game. The Vikings are not going to be able to get rid of him because no one's going to want to absorb that high of a contract for a quarterback. I believe that the Vikings will go to camp here, or basically start the year with 4 quarterbacks. They will lose Brad Johnson. They'll start with McMahon. They'll have Gannon. They'll have Salisbury.
Yeah, I don't agree with Brad Johnson. He's one of the most bright players that they have in that position.
Yeah, but what are they going to do? They have to keep McMahon.
Going to go to the practice squad this year.
Okay, but they have to keep McMahon and they have to keep Gannon because they can't. They're not
going to dump Gannon.
Well, who's going to take him?
They're going to just dump him like they did Herschel. They're not going to get anything for him.
Yeah, but they got to still pay him.
Well, they'd rather cut him and pay him than to have him tie up a roster spot and lose a young prospect.
The thing is, though, you got to remember, McMahon is not going to be there more than 4 or 5 games. He's going to get hurt. That's just a fact. I mean, he's not going to take every snap. He can't. So he's going to get hurt. So then you're going to have Gannon.
He's in the best shape of his career.
Yeah,
but they don't have
any. All of the publications say he's going to go down. But
sure, but they don't have any offensive line.
Look what he did with Philadelphia and Calvin Williams and Fred Barnett. He lit up the scoreboard.
You've lost Laudermilk.
2-3 touchdowns a game.
Zimmerman's not going to be here.
We don't know who they're replacing him with yet.
You lost Habib.
Well, you got John Garrett, that rookie out of Penn State. He's just supposedly moved right in.
They're not going to have any blocking.
I
don't care who they are.
We don't know. We'll see. Look at the breakthrough players they had last year that a lot of people never heard of. They thought the D-backs would be so susceptible last year, and they had, look at the interceptions and the broken plays that those guys
The Vikings' defense is very good.
150 points the last 4 seasons.
They're a good defense to take if you can get it.
Outscore Seattle.
They actually are ahead of them after about 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Then John Casey, the kicker, kind of kept him ahead there at the end. But
John Casey almost set a record last year for what, fewest points scored by a kicker
by
in a
kicker
season?
in an NFL season.
He ended up passing it.
Okay, we're going next here, guys.
I think we should talk about some of the notable free agents. We've touched on a few of them, but
Stephon Page, one of your favorites.
Stephon Page, now with the Vikings, he's got a tough competition, but I think with his overall experience, he's going to be there in the end.
Okay.
You know, it was real interesting. I was listening to The Fan last year, K-Fan, for those of you that may not know, and a guy called up claiming to be a relative or an associate of Stephon Page, guaranteeing the guys in The Fan that Stephon Page would be with the Vikings this year. I mean, nobody was even talking about it.
He's got the size. He was out of football for a year and a half or more. He's going to be in great condition. He's got Anthony Carter is falling off of his prime. He's going to still be there, but I think he's going to see spot duty. So that leaves Chris Carter on the one side. Who are you going to have?
Jake Reed.
Jake Reed. I don't see this big year out of Jake Reed. I think his binocular vision and all of his tests and stuff are fine.
Old Jake's overrated in your opinion.
I don't see it. I mean, the guy's never caught a touchdown before. He had 6 catches last year.
For the whole year. In 2 years. 6 in 2 years.
You know, okay,
Hasn't
he's
done
had
a lot.
breakthrough season, but if you're sitting there, Coach Green, and you've got Stephon Page, a proven winner out of Kansas City, or Jake Reed, who are you going to go with the start of the year?
Well, the start of the year, you're
Stephon
going
will
to go with
start,
You're
Stephon.
going to go with Stephon. And then you got Kadri.
He could figure into this offense.
I think
quite a
he'll
few
be in there right away.
I think they'll start him off returning kicks and punts, and who knows if Terry Allen stays down, Roger Craig can't take every snap.
No, but you have Robert Smith.
Yeah, that Robert Smith will be a good rookie
Robert
pick.
Smith,
I think he
and
will.
don't forget about Chuck Evans. Chuck Evans is a little-known back out of Clarksville, Georgia, that they were very
Clarksville, that's in hometown.
they were very high on last year. And Ronnie West. Ronnie West is out of Pittsburgh State. He's got good size.
Where's Rick Fenny when you need him?
Oh, Rick Fenny, he's banged up. Who do you think got the better deal of trading Hayward for Muster?
I think that was just a matter of just changing atmosphere and attitudes.
Yeah, I think so too.
I really do.
I think Hayward will probably have a better season than Muster.
I think he'll do good outside there in Soldier Field, barreling up the middle. I think he'll do real well.
He's just going to beat on them lines. I mean, he's so big. I don't think Muster will have that good of a year. I think Muster happened to fit into a good offense where he was at. I don't see him fitting in New Orleans.
You touched on a super offense with Miami Dolphins and Marino and Irvin Fryer, Mark Ingram, Keith Byers.
They're going to
Keith
be
Jackson.
They're going to be awesome.
Another one that you really got to be high on this year is the Green Bay Packers. I mean, look who they went out and got. They've already had Sterling Sharp, but now you've got Mark Clayton on the other side.
John Stevens in the backfield.
John Stevens in the backfield. He's going to be there.
Edgar Bennett. I mean, they have Daryl Thompson who hasn't done
They
anything
picked
yet.
up Alan Pinkett.
Alan Pinkett. I mean,
And Favre is
And
that guy
Favre
has a
is
gun. He's a big
6'4" coming into his own. I mean,
yeah, he has a gun out there. He can throw that ball. That's just going to open up the draw play and stuff. Having Sharp out there. Now they probably need to go out and get an elite tight end. They'd have the whole thing like Miami with
what's wrong with
Keith
the
Jackson.
tight end they had last year?
But I'm
Well,
telling
nothing's
you,
wrong, but you don't have
you
Keith
heard it here
Jackson.
first.
Wow.
Green Bay is going to be there in the end. They're going to be in the title game. I'm going to say it here.
Are you talking the
Here,
NFC title?
This is a famous legend move. I'm telling. 8-15, 7-26, 93. The Packers will be in the title game.
Are you talking the NFC title game or
The
the Super Bowl?
NFC title game
Against Dallas?
against San Francisco.
I think that if
I
Emmitt
think
Smith
Dallas
doesn't show up,
is
they're-
going to fall too much into their own attitudes.
what do you think of instilling in terms of attitude, trying to get the NFL to have a cap like the NBA?
Well, you already see it in effect this year with the rookies. So they're
But
working their way
I'm
into
talking
it.
team cap. I mean, you
It's-
could spend
it's gotta
15 million or 20. I mean, put a number out there.
Well, basically, though, if you put a salary cap in, but yet you allow free agency, you're going to end up with a team like it's doing in baseball. You're going to end up with one superstar on the team and a bunch of average
But
guys.
to backtrack, as long as there's TV revenue, you're going to have the big bucks. That's all
Oh, no
there is to
question
it.
about it. No question about
You
it.
go back to the 50s, before our time, and
Yeah, a little bit.
there was not the publicity in sports that you have now. You can turn on the TV Monday through Sunday, and you'll have baseball every single night on
Yeah.
ESPN.
Every time you
You've
turn
seen
around.
that change, though, too. I mean, look what happened to the...
Now there's a World Roller Hockey League that I see is
Did you watch that? That was pretty interesting. But anyway, with baseball, I mean, look what CBS did. There's no game of the week anymore. I mean, they took baseball right down the flusher as far as I'm concerned. And it very well could happen again. Last night they had an interview with Walter Payton on ESPN, and he says, free agency, he says, they asked, Tom Jackson was interviewing him, asked him his views on it. He said, free agency, I think you could be able to build a better team faster than you could through the draft, but the key is to keep them. He says, you won't be able to keep them. You will not develop that allegiance like Walter Payton had with the Bears.
Oh, no. But we were talking about what free agency the other night, and you said, name a team that's been successful just going out to get the free agents. And my mind goes back to the Redskins in the early 80s. They went out, they got all of the has-beens that nobody wanted. Joe Washington, for example, I believe he was a running back with the Indianapolis Colts, went to the Redskins, had a banner year. He's just one example, but I do remember 8 key players or so that they had that they called the old men.
Yeah, they were all discards. You're talking about Green Bay going out and acquiring all these guys at top dollar. You're talking big name players.
But that's because they're a community-owned team. They had the reserve.
Yes.
My grandfather played for the Green Bay Packers.
Years ago.
Back in 35 and 37. He played every position. They got pennies a game. I mean,
exactly.
Pennies, you know.
But I'm saying that I don't think you can go out and buy a team like that. I really don't. One thing, you start bringing in them big players, you're bringing in egos with it.
Well, you can do it for a short time, and Dallas is finding that. You know, now Emmett's not going to shine. It's almost like that's why people can't repeat anymore. Once they win, it's like, oh, well, everybody gets a big head, and they win.
They write a book.
Yeah, and they
look what it did to the Giants. Look what it did to the Giants.
Kirby Puckett, he wrote a book. I mean, every time somebody wins.
You're going to find that more and more of these players are going to get paid on their past performances. I mean, Kirby Puckett, exactly. Look what he's getting paid for. He's getting paid for when he hit, what, 356 a few years ago. He's not getting paid the big dollars this year.
They've been getting paid for past performances all their life. If they do a system,
but I don't mind that as much.
Commission.
You pay them per down, per snap they take. Who cares if they pay
guess who that comes down on? You're going to have players whining at the management because Tom Kelly isn't pitching guys whole innings nowadays with the baseball. You're going to find that, well, I didn't get in there. Well, I know, but I'm just saying, it's going to come down. No, it's going to come down to these players feel, I'm not getting used properly, so I'm not going to get paid. You're talking, guys are not going to get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars because they take 1 or 2 fewer snaps a game.
Oh, and what you'd want to do, like for baseball, just as long as they suit up, as long as they're available to play, that's how you'd want to put that in.
David Klingler, what did he make last year and what did he do?
That's fine. That's what a backup's for, as long as the guy's suited to play. I mean, you get these guys, they get injured, and they still keep getting money. That doesn't right.
Bobby Hebert and Chris Miller. There's a classic example. Bobby Hebert, as we alluded to earlier,
2.7,
$2.4 million, sitting on the bench behind Chris Miller, who's now whining because he's being paid 1.4 or 1.7
right.
million. I mean, where does it end?
Yeah,
why does
he
a
wants
backup player get more money than a starter?
Then you find a guy, a throwback like Miller, said that really didn't bother him. He was named the starter, and he said that didn't bother him as bad.
Well, why would it bother him?
Why was it in the paper and he talked about it?
But the media created that. They
you kind of took a shot at Atlanta. That's the way they
shot at Atlanta. That's the way that they run their operation.
Kind of Mickey Mouse, I think.
Hey, they got Jerry Glanville. How more Mickey Mouse do you need?
Well, that's true.
Well, he has his 4 years somewhere, and then he's off to another Elvis land.
Okay, where are we going to move on? Let's go to another team, New England. What are your thoughts on New England this year? Some of them different new coach coming in.
Well, I'm not big on New England. I'm big on Indy. I think Indianapolis will do well.
What's your thoughts on New England?
I've never been a New England fan. I mean, I don't see them.
I personally think that Parcells' influence, their defense is going to come around. Last year they weren't great on defense, but they did have the turnovers. They had 7 touchdowns scoring, I believe.
Their defense is going to keep them in the game and win games for them.
The
they're 3 years
sports
away.
fanatic isn't going to look at, but if you're a fantasy-minded person, you got to keep in mind 7 touchdowns on a defense.
Exactly.
You know, that's
draft their defense.
Draft their defense. I've been saying it all year. But as far as their team, the wide receiver position's wide open. I think Greg McMurtry definitely has the spot nailed down.
Old Michigan Wolverine there.
You got it.
Big Ten boy.
Yeah.
Big Ten boy.
John Vaughn in the backfield,
another Big Ten
alumni. Yeah.
He's a good kickoff returner too.
Outstanding.
Yeah, that guy's very gifted.
But there's a lot of questions. I mean, they got rid of Hugh Millen. He went to free agency land in Dallas. Now they've picked up Scott Secules, I don't know how you pronounce it, out of Miami.
A high pick out of Miami. Yeah.
And he hasn't been a proven performer.
No, he's really not.
So who are you gonna have for a quarterback? And then who do you throw to? Hartley Dykes, is he still around?
Hartley Dykes.
There's a famous football name, but
Well, at least they don't have
done?
Irving Fire throwing a knife at his old lady or anything.
Yeah, you don't need that, that's for sure. Okay, what are we going to talk about on upcoming shows here, guys?
Upcoming shows, I think we're going to look at, should we tell them about the fan mail?
Oh, we can do that. Go ahead and tell them.
Fan mail. For those of you that are interested, you can send in your letters to care of the Sportszone, Post Office Box 367, Monticello, Minnesota, and that's 55362, and put attention to legends on there. That'll get right to us. We'll read your fan mail.
Then we can read stuff on there. They can ask us trivia questions, or we can give stuff out.
Try and stump the legends. And we're also going to have a trivia contest, too.
We do that today, or?
Where is that outstanding prize? Let's
outstanding prize that
check out.
Provided to you from.
These are so ever graciously donated and supplied to us by the Coast to Coast store in Monticello. Some nice little Vikings mugs here.
Where's that conveniently located there, Tom?
I believe at 212 West 3rd Street.
Okay.
The owner there, he's a pretty nice guy. I kind of have a close influence with him here, and he said that he would donate these to us for our trivia contest that we're going to have this season.
And just send in your answer to that address Todd gave you. And our first question is going to be, we want to know which NFL quarterback was the only quarterback that took every snap for which team last year. Who was that guy? There was only one guy.
We want to know the quarterback and the team?
Can I give him a hint?
No.
No hint?
No, not the first week in the season.
No. They don't need a hint. There's only 26 quarters. Only 26
it doesn't
teams.
have to do with last year. It has to do with the year before. Only because I picked the sled.
Oh, that hint you can give him, sure.
Yeah, he was a safety pick of mine in 1991. In the first week of the year, he went down with a broken thumb.
So in the first year,
that's
in 91, he didn't hardly play at all. In 92, he took every single snap for that team.
And was a superstar.
And he did a great job.
That's the story of my fantasy. I picked the team the year before, and they come through
and
next year.
And if we do get more than one correct answer,
then we'll
have to draw them.
We'll have to draw them. Yeah.
We're gonna have trivia question every week.
Right.
From
we'll give away gift to the fans out there, so we'll get them all dialed in there.
And there again, go send your fan mail. We're looking for some trivia questions. Try and stump the legends here.
At the Sportszone.
At the Sportszone. Anybody that can stump the legends will also receive a prize too.
There you go.
And if you want to address baseball, bowling, NASCAR, we'll talk about it all. We're sports fanatics, and that's why we're here. But major emphasis on fantasy football.
Thanks for your time.
See you next week.
Welcome to another edition of the Sports Zone with your hosts, Windmill, The Ledge, and Lars.
Alongside me is Lars.
Hey, everybody.
And a vacant seat over here taking a sabbatical is not here, is the Ledge. But he's off in Colorado. He's going to give us a sports report on the Rockies and the Broncos, and that'll be on our next edition. We're going to cover a wide variety of topics today, and I think one that we definitely should start out with, because there was another tragedy in sports this week, is Reggie Lewis.
Another Celtics take another tough one. Just another tragedy in the old Celtic family here in the last few years. What do you think about it, Wendy?
Well, I think it's another situation of an athlete falling victim to their love of a game. It's no different than a gambler. Where do you draw the line and when you're going to quit? The Boston Celtics assembled a superstar team of 11 doctors. They all said that he had cardiomyopathy. That's a potentially lethal condition.
12. I mean, if you're Reggie Lewis, you're going to keep looking until you find a doctor that you feel comfortable with that gives you the answer you want.
Exactly.
I mean, I think you're at the point with him that he wasn't going to quit playing basketball. He was their captain. He was their future. I mean, you lose Larry Bird and Kevin McHale in 1 year, and about your only real strong point is Reggie Lewis. And you had Parrish last year getting a drug charge against him. So I mean, they only really had one good superstar to go to, and him and D. Brown. And you can see D. Brown is pretty torn up by it all too.
Well, I think the whole NBA in general is tore up by an event like that. But just to expound on it, the year in sports, you can't go by without mentioning all of the tragedies. You start with the preseason baseball. You have Bobby Ojeda, who he's just a mess. He psychologically is not able to work with baseball. He had to go back to Baltimore to talk to a psychologist, talking about the deaths of his teammates Tim Cruz and Steve Olin. That's just one example.
He may never pitch again.
I think he will, but I think there's a lot of internal healing that needs to take place.
That's tough to take. I mean, when you experience something that close to them guys and, you know, their buddies, obviously out having a good time, he may never pitch again. He's only talked publicly about it, what, once since it happened?
Once, right.
But that's going to be tough. That was really tough on that whole organization because they were supposed to have a pretty good team.
Yeah, they were on the uprise, and they were going to be right there at the top, and I think to a credit to the whole team, they're right there in the middle of things, and they're not out of it yet.
That's just tough. You know who assembled that team down there in Cleveland, don't you?
No.
Rick Bay.
Oh, yes, Rick Bay, our former Minnesota advisor.
Weasel.
Weasel.
He was a weasel.
Yeah.
We had another NBA death this year, pretty tragic.
Drazen.
A while back. Drazen Petrovic.
Petrovic.
Hit me kind of hard. I had personal experience. I met Drazen after a Timberwolves game one time down in the cities. Met him at a bar, and he was with some other New Jersey Nets players. And I talked to him at the bar, bought him a drink, and we conversed for a little bit, and I was really impressed with the guy. Real nice guy. I mean, he could have just said, you know, get away from me, but he was a real nice guy. And I even got his autograph. He signed my hat for me.
Yeah, but again, a case of another athlete that's just out joyriding. And
I've been on those roads. I'm not exactly familiar with the exact spot he was at, but I was over in Europe 3 years ago, and I drove on the Autobahn, and it's pretty scary. I mean,
speeds are intense. You can go 130, 140 miles an hour.
They got guys going well over that because we were doing that in a little escort going to the airport one day.
Sure.
And they say when they get a pileup over there, it's not just 3 or 4 cars, it's 30, 40, 50 cars.
And speaking of pileups, then you have the deaths in auto racing.
Yeah, there's a couple tough ones too.
You can forget Alan Kulwicki, who went down in a plane crash in Tennessee. Then months later, you have Davey Allison, who was learning his new sport of flying helicopters. He almost set it down, and
all of a sudden
it just took off 25 feet in the air and went straight down.
That's tough because, I mean, NASCAR has had, those are some real superstars in the NASCAR circuit. They were going to take over. You had Richard Petty retire last year.
Yeah.
You got Bill Elliott hasn't been doing real well. You got Dale Earnhardt's been driving real well. You got a lot of new guys coming on the scene. And Kulwicki and Allison were some of the real strong.
Well, they're the heart of the sport.
Oh, and then the Alabama gang with Allison. I mean, that whole Allison family's got, they must have a complex. I mean,
they lost Clifford Allison last year at Michigan Speedway, just about a year ago, almost to the day.
And Bobby had to quit racing due to
head injuries
from
accidents. So it's just it's a year that you can't really take it in stride, because every time you turn around, something's happening. And if you go back to baseball again, you have Roy Campanella, and then the following week, Don Drysdale.
I heard from watching ESPN and stuff, that funeral, I guess, was just a complete, both those funerals were a who's who in baseball. You name it, anybody having to do with baseball of that era, everybody was there.
Yeah.
I mean, they said there was nobody missing. It was all the big names there. But boy, that's pretty tough on the Dodgers organization, too.
Yeah. Well, and the most disturbing thing, I think, about all of these superheroes passing away is that if it was a normal person on the street, which this happens quite often, you don't see the coverage. But because They are a hero in our minds and in our eyes. We see them every day on the TV. It really affects you a lot more than...
Well, there's people like with Reggie Lewis's illness, there's people that die of that goes undiagnosed. I mean, they die of heart failure, and nobody ever knows.
Well, there's a guy out in California or somewhere out west. He called Reggie Lewis and pleaded with him not to play basketball any longer.
And then on the sports this weekend, they listed off 3 players currently that have this problem, and 2 out of the 3 have eventually quit playing ball, and there's a 3rd one that is playing over in Europe now for the American, I don't know if it's the American national team, 22 and under team or
Probably
something.
the Nike team.
And I mean, but like, if you relate that to everyday Joe walking the street, there's a lot of them that they never have this diagnosed. They don't have...
Just do it, baby.
Just
right
do
there. That's where it comes in.
So I don't think you would have stopped that. And then a guy like Hank Gathers, he'd have probably known about his illness too, but I don't think he could have stopped him either.
Well, Hank Gathers knew about his illness, but he was also taking medicinal.
But you can see he cut his medicine back. He wasn't taking his medicine as directed. So I think when you get a guy that's in that position, I think that the fame and the money is just too big of a draw. They're going to live it good while they live it, and what happens, happens. But then you get people trying to downplay it, like Reggie Lewis's wife said. Well, he'd been behaving himself. He wasn't exerting himself. Well, he'd been playing some games, and he'd also been working up. He was supposed to have a test, I believe, this week, a stress test.
Yeah.
And they said that, all of a sudden he just collapses. And his wife said he wasn't playing, but yet everybody on the court said they were going to play a game.
Well, he was going to play one-on-one.
I heard it was more than that. We'll probably never know. But
Well, let's move on to something a little bit not so somber in mood. The Hall of Fame this weekend.
my favorite, as you can see right here,
Oh, you did change jerseys.
I changed jerseys.
I thought
this
you
week.
had the same jersey.
No. We got the Walter Payton Memorial.
Well,
jersey
it's a
this
true
week.
Bears fanatic we have alongside me. The Bears.
You gotta like the Bears.
Going into the Bears Hall of Fame this week, Walter Payton.
Walter Payton, he's probably the all-time best. I don't think anybody else.
Sweetness.
I mean, he defined the Bears. I mean, how do you follow up Gale Sayers? You follow up Gale Sayers with Walter Payton.
You follow up Walter Payton with Neil Anderson. It's just one.
Neil.
Right here, Neil.
Let's
Yes.
hopefully Neil should have a good year this year, they're saying.
Yeah.
Walter Payton, #1 all-time running back. 16,000 yards, over 100 touchdowns. Only 1 touchdown short of what he really needed, though.
That's the big one in the Super Bowl. That's the only one that he never got.
Upset a lot of Bears fans when the refrigerator, who will be forgotten long after
That's
Walter
very
Payton is
true.
still being remembered, they give him a touchdown, and Walter Payton doesn't get a touchdown. I thought that was pretty disappointing.
I think he's just happy to have the ring, and he has all the honors to go along with it, so I don't think he'll be that bitter.
He's got some good records, too. I mean, he's got 9 Pro Bowl appearances, and he's also got...
Well, who can forget the game against the Vikings?
back in 77.
275 yards,
And still lose the game.
and they still lose the game. That's the Vikings.
The
Boy, that
Vikings-
incredible defense that's now there. Wasn't there then, but
Well, the Vikings have some pretty amazing records against them, too. Tony Dorsett's run,
99 yards.
incredible. And, Walter Payton running wild on them.
Yeah.
Year in and year out, Walter Payton had good years against them. Next player, Dan Fouts.
My favorite of all time. Led the San Diego Chargers to 7 out of 8 years. They were #1 in passing. That's quite an accomplishment. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's done it since.
He's got 51 300-yard games.
Oh, I remember watching Fouts with John Jefferson, Kellen Winslow, Charlie Joyner. Absolutely just poetry in motion. They were the epitome of the game in the early 80s. I'll never forget a game against the Vikings. The only highlight that really stands to mind, of course, is a Viking highlight, but I believe it was Tommy Kramer going down the middle to Leo Lewis.
Kramer.
Lewis over-the-shoulder catch, smashed his head, kept the ball.
One of the few good plays the Vikings did. Tommy Kramer used to throw him higher than he did long.
But going back to Fouts, he had 2 400-yard games in a row. I don't know that anybody has ever done that since.
I'm not sure. I'd have to check with Warren Moon and see what he's had some big games.
Yeah.
Fouts, 6 3,000-yard seasons, and he also had 3 4,000-yard seasons. Guy's got over 43,000 yards career
Right
passing.
behind Fran,
Right.
Sir Francis.
Yes, he's right behind Fran in most every.
Another Viking.
But incredible. 6 Pro Bowls for Dan Fouts, but no Super Bowls.
Yeah, and I think that really says something, that the Hall of Fame is finally making a statement that you don't have to have a Super Bowl ring to get into it.
Right. He was only a couple plays from getting in the Super Bowl back against the Raiders. All he needed, if he'd have got another series in there, I think
Well,
he
that's
would
the
have.
famous Dave Casper kick, isn't it? Where they kicked the ball into the end zone.
That could have been the game. And then they also had the 81 game at Miami.
That's
that
where
went
the
into
rule
overtime.
of not advancing the football
The
comes in
Raiders,
on a...
Raiders again, pretty notorious. for
Yeah,
that,
well, they were very crafty, and that's another subject with Al Davis. He's really tearing that team apart more than anything.
Yeah, we were just checking that out last night. How about Larry Little? Get any thoughts on Larry Little?
Outstanding guard, never really received the true recognition that he should. You always think of the great teams of the 70s and 80s, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, the 49ers. They always come to mind, even the Dallas Cowboys, but never in the same breath do you hear the Miami Dolphins. And let's face it, they're the only team to ever go 17-0
And he was part of that
and lose
team.
two games in 2 full years.
Unreal.
I mean, it's just unheard of, and I don't think that you're ever going to see it duplicated again, especially with free agency and all of the things that are taking place in the game. It's not going to happen.
Started off his career with the Chargers, and he got, I believe, traded to the Dolphins, played most of his career with the Dolphins. 3 straight Super Bowls that guy went to.
Unbelievable.
And he's got 5 Pro Bowls, too. So you can see a pattern here where these guys are having 5, 6, 8, and 9 Pro Bowls. But yet, like Fouts didn't win a Super Bowl, which is good to see that somebody's actually getting in for not winning.
Well, it's about time. The guy was phenomenal, and very little. He's not one of those players where you really get much exposure. He's up on the front line, he's in the trenches, but let's face it, for Larry Zonka and Bob Greasy and those guys to come through without him.
Well, hopefully, too. I'm not a Vikings fan, but I still think there's some Vikings players out there that could deserve to be in the Hall of Fame that aren't getting there.
Randall McDaniel.
Well, yeah, his career.
Premier All-Pro, he's going to be there.
Well, we'll see when his career's
He's gonna
over.
be there.
I mean, he's got 10 years before he's even eligible here, I think.
Yeah.
But then you get some of the guys out of the purple people eaters that aren't there that could and should be there.
That's true.
A couple coaches also got put in the Hall of Fame this week. A couple great ones. Chuck Noll.
One of the best all time, took a team that was in dire straits in the early 70s and brought them to the prosperous years of 76, 77,
75 and 76.
75 and 76.
And 79 and 80.
79 and 80. And of course, one of those years against the Vikings.
His 6th all-time winning coach. That's a
Unbelievable.
hell of a record.
You know, I was really surprised when he retired, and I saw a little bit of his interview, and he's so busy doing things for other people, the blind in Pittsburgh, that he's not really missing the game. And
that's good, because I liked him. I've met Terry Bradshaw a few times. I was not really impressed with Terry Bradshaw. He seemed to be pretty extrovert, arrogant type
Terry
guy.
Bradshaw, if you think of him, he's now an outstanding announcer, but it's just like us sitting here. He went through his initial phase and stage, and he was terrible. I mean, I couldn't stand to listen to the guy, and now they are one of the most successful combinations on TV, is Greg Gumbel and Terry Bradshaw.
Exactly.
So
Another coach got put into the Hall of Fame this week, Bill Walsh.
unbelievable. The innovator of all of the football that we currently know today. It's implemented by just about every team out there in one fashion.
How
or
many
another.
former assistant coaches does he have in the NFL now?
I couldn't even count them. You have Dennis Green, you have Mike Holmgren, Dave Wanstead, with now your team, the Bears.
The Bears.
Unbelievable. He just a modern day legend, but if you talk to him, he would humble himself and say that he learned from the likes of Clark Shaughnessy way back when.
Whoa, pull one out of the hat there.
Well, there's somebody else that he would have said, but I can't recall who that is.
He's got a pretty good career, too. He coached basically the Niners for 10 years. He's got 3 Super Bowls, 82, 85, and 89. He's also the 49ers winningest coach. Pretty good. He's got about a 680 winning percentage in the regular season.
680 is pretty tough to top.
81 Coach of the Year in the NFL, and I believe he was the NFC Coach of the Year in about 83, 84, I think.
And I think Joe Montana wouldn't be where he is today without
That
the
system.
Bill Walsh system, because that really allows a player to get the most.
Oh, well, look at just a quick flashback to the Niners here. Did you see who they got in the draft this year? Elvis Gerbach.
Elvis Gerbach, they're always pulling one out of the hat there.
Did you hear on draft day that the 49ers offered Bill Parcells all their draft choices this year for the #1 choice, and they turned it down?
Did not know that.
That's pretty incredible. We'll see if that comes back.
I can't believe that they would turn that down.
I can't either.
That would bring you back to the days of the Herschel Walker era. 12 players for one guy. You'd think it was, as a Viking fan, which I'll admit, I'm a Viking fan. They're my favorite team, but the Packers are still going to be there.
I'm not sure about that. They got to. We'll see.
Well, they look lethargic, but, one preseason doesn't do it for all of them.
Their defense, all they've got is Reggie White as far as I can see. We'll see what happens, though.
Speaking of which, we had some preseason action this weekend.
Should we get to that next?
Yeah, let's get the fans up to date on it on Thursday night.
Who do we have? Buffalo and Detroit?
Buffalo, Detroit.
What can you tell us about the game, Wendell?
Well, it was another, typical preseason game. I really don't think you can get much out of it, but from a statistical standpoint, I think Rodney Peete has one up on Andre Ware.
I heard an interview, though, with Wayne Fonts this weekend, and he liked to compare himself to Sparky. He said Sparky doesn't name all his starting pitchers before the season. He waits until a week before the season starts, which is kind of a thing, but I hope he's not comparing his quarterbacks to Sparky's pitchers this year, because it could be a tough year. If he does. But they've actually got 3 good quarterbacks there. We have to see what Andre Ware can prove. He came out highly touted. Rodney Peete and Eric Kramer, I mean, I think if the two Peete and Ware stumble, I think the crowd's going to be wanting Kramer back.
Well, Kramer came out of nowhere in 91, but then he was nowhere to be found in 92.
Yeah, but he showed what he could do, and he had a good year. And another thing Wayne Font said about the Detroit this year is he said that they don't want to be referred to as, what happened last year. They want to look at what happened in 91.
Right.
They've had a pretty tragic couple of years here with Utley and Andelsek.
Andelsek, yeah, we forgot to cover him.
And they basically have the same team as they did in 91 with a few good, actually great additions with Pat Swilling.
Pat Swilling on the defense, he's really going to shore that up with Spielman in the middle. I just can't wait to see what they're going to be like together.
Detroit, I think, could be fighting for a top position in the NFC.
I think they're going to be a wild card.
Yeah, they could. I think that, if they get just a good, mediocre year, they don't need a standing year from Rodney Peete, but, you always have Barry Sanders. And they have a great line for him behind,
Well, that's just it, and that's what I was going to expound on, is that you're going to have an outstanding year from Peete with the front line. They went out and got Bill Fralick from the Falcons, a couple of other ones in there, less notable, but when you got a good line in front of you, sky's the limit, and Barry Sanders is going to have a field day this year.
I think he could go wild. Matter of fact, I think he could or should be the #1 pick in most fantasy drafts.
I agree with you.
Emmett Smith, he's on the old cover of the Fantasy Football Digest this year.
As was last year.
Emmett was not on the cover last year, was he?
Yeah, I believe. Who was on the cover?
Was it Randall last year? Randall Cunningham, I believe. And he...
Dallas is telling. What do you...
It was Randall Cunningham. Remember? Because he took the helmet.
Randall Cunningham was in 91 because he took this pop to the knee from Bryce Pop.
But wasn't that...
Play on words in the first week of the season against Green Bay.
Was it Sanders?
Last year was Barry Sanders.
Sanders was on the cover last year.
And I think that's something we should point out, that anybody that does follow fantasy football, there was for many years, this is now the 10th annual edition, for 8 years, whoever was on the cover went down for the year, and it was known as the Fantasy Jinx. So I think last year is a good example that it finally has been broke.
If you look at this and understand, though, you got guys, the guy they put on the cover is the player of the year. And you know how hard it is to follow up a fantastic year with even a better year? So you're going to have a year that's going to be below the year before. Who'd they have? Dalton Hilliard on one year?
Yeah, but he went out. That's what I'm saying. They go out for the entire year. It's not something
well,
where they have a
Sanders didn't go out for the whole year, though, but he did have a subpar season.
Sure.
He did not have a good season last year.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of funny that Emmett Smith's on the cover this year and he's not in camp, and he could... how's he going to follow up this year? You got a lot of guys and egos to satisfy in that Dallas team. I don't know how they're going to afford to keep them all.
Well, let's get to Dallas in a little bit.
Okay.
They had some action against the Vikings this weekend. getting back to the Detroit-Buffalo game, not really a lot that you can say other than Pete had 2 touchdowns passing.
Jim Kelly didn't look good.
Kelly, he's never impressed me. I mean, people would argue that he's a top 5 quarterback, but he's never done anything for me.
He's put the numbers up, but I think it has to do with the system he's in.
I agree.
I think, there was talk of a trade for Jim Kelly for Jeff George. I don't know how well he'd do in a different system. I really don't.
I think he should have a change of atmosphere, but let's get on to the next game.
Next game, how about Green Bay versus the Raiders?
The Packers, they kind of let me down.
The Packers?
The Packers, that's what I'm going to call them this year.
They
take away the Bears, and I'm going to go with the Packers.
Well, they ought to start packing the way they played.
Well, they looked mighty lethargic. I can agree with you there.
That's not even a point a quarter.
No. Thank God it was a preseason game.
How about the Raiders? What did you think? Vince Evans, kind of fitting that Vince Evans with 2 touchdowns.
Former Bear.
In the Hall of Fame game when they're inducted Walter Payton.
I've watched him the last couple of years, and the guy just looks as smooth as glass. He's never lost a stride.
But he just can't find his fit.
But he can't find nobody wants him as a starting quarterback. Hey, maybe the Vikings get another 6th quarterback in there.
Just what they need.
Yeah, well.
Gino Toretto only gets 2 or 3 handoffs.
But Vince definitely looked good, and I don't think you could say much for the Raiders. Let's move on to the next game.
How about the old Saints beating the Eagles this week?
Saints look good.
The Saints look real good. Wade Wilson.
Happy Feet Wilson was in there, and he looked just like the days of old with the Vikings. And
yeah, but he had, 10 touchdowns last year to end the season, the last 6 games?
He went on a free agency ride. Let's look as good as I can and get as much bucks for the money as
Why doesn't he look good all the time then?
He looked like Happy Feet Wilson again on Saturday.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of his, but I think he had some talent. He was a pretty level-headed guy back when him and Kramer were around. I talked to Wade Wilson at training camp one time, and he was a pretty nice guy, versus Tommy just kind of blow you off and say, hey, I got to get to the trough, man.
Nice doesn't get it, though.
There's chicks at the trough.
But the Saints, I think you could look for a lot on the tight end game this year.
With who?
Frank Wainwright, out of nowhere, gets a 68 yards, I believe. He looked like a big oaf in the middle of the field, but he kept his stride and he made it into the end zone.
What's that say about the Eagles' D-backs when you got a tight end that's about 6'8", 490?
It says that the linebacker who is trying to replace
Swelling?
Not Swelling, no. Swelling's on the other side of the ball. We're talking about the...
I'm thinking the Phillies. I'm sorry. The linebacker, no, it wasn't Seth.
Not Seth. But they
anyway.
lost him a free agent. Anyway, he was the guy that missed the coverage. And if you're a linebacker trying to cover a tight end out of the backfield, 60 yards down the field, you're out of it. See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya.
How about Randall looked pretty good.
Hey, my man came through. My about number 6 draft pick last year, Vaughn Dunbar, up over the middle.
He had a nice touchdown.
First score. Look for a lot out of Vaughn. I think he's going to be the main go-to.
Did you see any of the quarterback competition this week?
Did not.
The quarterback challenge?
No, there's this thing called work.
Yeah, I know. But there's also a thing called a VCR.
Yeah, well, that's true, too.
So I taped that. That was actually pretty interesting. The longest throw competition, Vinny Testaverde holds the record at 80 yards.
Ooh, that says a lot for Vinny, doesn't it?
Yeah, too bad there was nobody down there. He couldn't see where the ball landed anyway.
Put some defenders in front of that 80 yards, and I'll bet he couldn't get it there.
But it was real interesting is they had like Aikman and Young threw some higher than they threw them long, only 50, 55 yards. 51 yards, I think, was a short one.
Well, accuracy is the key. Distance doesn't
Randall threw one. Randall threw in about 65 yards. But you know who won the accuracy contest? Jeff Hostetler.
Really?
Figure that one out later.
Mr. Raider.
Yep. He actually looked pretty good. Him and Dan Marino and Warren Moon were the top 3 in the accuracy, where they have these moving targets cruising across.
They have big tires going across or something?
No, it's a big target. And then
they've gotten a little more modernized now than
yeah.
Right.
And they take the football.
I guess I'm thinking of those carnival days that you go to a little, carnival at the grade school.
And throw it through a go-kart tire.
Throw a little go-kart tire, yeah.
But they take and they chalk up the end of the football. So they throw this thing, and wherever it hits, it leaves this chalk mark.
Like a big splat.
Yeah. It was pretty good. Marino last year threw one at the deep target. Dead bullseye. Won the competition last year.
He's awesome.
Moving on. I think he'll have a good year this year, too.
But what about the Eagles? Did you see anything from the Eagles in that game?
Yeah.
Worth pointing out?
James Joseph.
James Joseph, he really stood out. I think
he could be good too.
I think it's going to get Heath Sherman back into camp in a real hurry.
He better, or else he'll be sitting back, because
Yeah.
I think Joseph's got the potential. I liked him last year. I believe I tried to pick him up, and somebody had already picked him ahead of me.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Par for the course, isn't it?
well, no.
Well, that's all right. But I think Herschel, what can you say about Herschel? He's always in the mix of things, and he seems to be around for the first half of the year, but you look at the last half, and he just kind of disappears. He goes from 25 rushes a game to, 6 or 7 rushes or attempts a game. And he just kind of becomes a forgotten man, and I don't think it's the system anymore. I think it's Herschel and his will to win. It just isn't there. It's not the days of when he was with Georgia.
I think he's got too many distractions, because when he was in college, he was world class. He was a world class.
College isn't the pros.
I know, but I'm just saying, this guy was all world. I mean, he was world-class sprinter. He did everything in college. I was a big Herschel Walker fan in college. He did everything. He went to the Generals. He had, what, a 2,000-yard season that one year?
Yeah.
And it seems like...
Defunct USFL, though, right?
But if you look at his... He didn't cause it to go under.
No.
Steve Young might have with his $30 million contract.
Getting back on the Eagles here. What about Millard?
Keith Millard.
Comes out of nowhere.
Absolutely. I mean,
retired twice, 3 times?
they say he's got a heck of an attitude this year, too. I mean, it's a good attitude. I mean, he goes to Seattle, gets in a squabble there, storms off the field, leaves. Would they waive him or trade him?
They discarded him. I really thought he'd end up in the 49ers camp last year, and they would make a rebuilding project out of him. But he went to the Packers.
The guy had all the potential in the world. I mean, I saw him down at training camp one year. The guy is huge and solid, but he's got a big, thick muscle between his ears.
Big muscle, and he really likes to fight and pick a fight.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got a real attitude problem, but, I wish the best for him. I think he's on a comeback trail.
And then, Green Bay last year, he broke his hand, said, I quit.
Yeah.
And he comes back this year out of nowhere. I didn't even realize it here until a week or two ago, and I was reading the paper, and then he was and I'm like, what? He actually played a pretty good part in that Phillies game.
Yeah. When we had San Francisco and Pittsburgh. San Francisco. They look like they have not missed a beat. Marched right down the field, Young to Rice, just like it was regular season.
Jerry Rice.
Methodical.
Full speed all the time. Preseason, all the time. He's full speed and never loses a step.
Outstanding. You just can't say enough about him. But 21-14.
He,
49ers.
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Jerry, oh, there he is. How you doing, Jerry? Anyway, he looked good, and of course, my quarterback of all time, Steve Young.
Steve Young.
I mean, you can't say enough. I mean, look at some of the runs he's got. He's got runs that'll be on
highlight film forever
years.
Against who?
The Vikings.
The Vikings.
Awesome quarterback. You want to talk about that Vikings game?
Do we have to?
Well, I suppose there's some people out there who might like to hear about it.
13-7. Vikings did it. Pretty pathetic, though.
13 penalties, 7 off 5.
5 Viking quarterbacks and 8 completed passes.
You can't count the 5, though. Tourette only handed off 3 times.
Okay.
Less than
4.
after 2-minute warning.
4
What did you think of
quarterbacks.
Brad Johnson?
Victor, the ledge, I think, is right. We're not going to see much of Mr. Johnson.
I thought he was a favorite of yours.
I stand corrected. It looked like he settled down, and he's just in his own world. He should have been there with Fumbleitis.
Fumbleia. Fumbleruski.
I can't think of the Fumbleitis. Steve Dills. He was good at fumbling. he reminds me of him.
How about,
But in all defense of Dallas, as they are the champions and
they
everything,
didn't have anybody playing last night.
Dallas less Emmett Smith, less Troy Aikman. They looked as lethargic as Green Bay did.
They had that running back, that Lassick. He looked pretty good.
Derek Lassick out of Alabama. He's going to be a good rookie, and if he doesn't persuade Emmett to come to camp, he's going to be their guy.
Emmett's not worried. Emmett's going to get his money from somebody. Although they're trying to hold him out, too. There's some stipulation that the Cowboys can send him a notice, and if he doesn't report for every preseason game he misses, he can miss regular season game, which I don't understand the reasoning behind
We're
it.
going to have to check into that.
I got to check into that but that was announced during the game.
Gain by not having him.
I don't fully understand either, but that was something they talked about this weekend, about him not being in camp. But there's another good topic we can talk about. You're looking at a team like Dallas coming into the salary cap next year. What's the salary cap going to be in the 30 million category somewhere? You're going to have, hypothetically, Emmitt Smith making $4.5 million a year. You're going to have Troy Aikman's going to want to make that kind of money. Michael Irvin's going to feel like he needs that kind of money.
Well, and that gets into what I talked about last week,
Haley
the
too.
attitude thing. You know, where does it end?
But
I think we should, you know, take and expound on that topic next week. And we should move into a trivia question for our fans this week.
Have you got one?
I don't.
I don't have one either.
You have the 9 ways to reach base.
Should we ask that one?
Why don't you? It's your favorite, and I couldn't even answer it myself, so we're going to have to look them up or find an expert. But this is the Legends trivia question of the week.
We need to have somebody write us a letter telling us the 9 ways that you can reach first base. We don't know. We absolutely don't know. We can come up with 6, but we don't know 9. So if somebody can come in and tell us the 9 ways.
Where's
you can
that
reach
beautiful
first-
prize?
That beautiful prize isn't here this week.
Well, if you can
If you
visualize,
can see it, it'd be a nice
it'd be a
Viking
nice
mug.
helmet of a Viking mug.
Donated too by, ever so graciously, by the Coast to Coast hardware store in Monticello again. That guy's really nice over there, you know.
Yeah.
What else you want to talk about this week, Windmill?
I think we should put a wrap on it. And
Should we tell them what we're going to talk about in upcoming shows?
I think the upcoming show, we're going to look at the top 5 players to look at in fantasy football. I think we'll expand a little bit more on fantasy football because a lot of the feedback we've gotten, people still aren't really understanding what a fantasy league is. So we're going to try and cover that a little bit more in depth. But we're also going to give you what our top 5 picks are, not based on Mr. Charpentier or my favorite sources right here.
Or
Football, Sporting
Grogan's.
But we'll cover that a little in depth next week, and
We'll have the legend back next week.
the Ledge will be back, and he's going to be back from his sabbatical. He's going to give us. He called me last night, told me that Denver fans are crazy about the Rockies. Everybody in the street has
Yes.
Rocky memorabilia.
They had the largest National League night game attendance here last week. What, they have 72,000 or something?
72,000, and they're building a small stadium for 48,000. That doesn't make sense.
They're going to blow the record away. It won't be touchable. Didn't he say they're going wild over the
They're over
Donkeys,
3
too?
million. Yeah, they didn't talk to him. He didn't. He was really high on the Rockies.
When I was out in Denver last year, late August, the fans were all over them Donkeys. I mean, they're worse than Vikings
Donkeys
fans.
being the Broncos?
The Denver Donkeys, yeah. It's a
Not
pet.
high on your list?
No, it's a pet name for actually. If you're from Denver, they call them the Donkeys if they're not real big fans.
Okay.
We'll also, like I say, we'll talk about more fantasy next week. We're also going to come up, each one of us 3 will come up with our favorite 5 list, players to look for, maybe some more sleepers and stuff. We'll do that when the legend comes back next week. Should we show them what we got here, Wendy?
Well, I think that's kind of your creation. You can kind of talk about that.
When you really get into the High Buck Fantasy League here, where you get a lot of guys participating, we came up with our traveling trophy for the...
He came up with this 2 years ago, and he just uncovered it in his basement. That's how important it is.
Well, you see, that's because I plan on winning it
See,
this
there's
year.
absolutely no names inscribed on it whatsoever.
And we also have our traveling trophy here.
Yeah, look at all the names on here.
Well, hey, it's
Blank,
new. It's
blank,
new.
blank. And this, you know, this should say Scott Moglen last year.
Well, it's your chance this year to win the Living Legends Fantasy Football League. Your chance.
I'm going to be there.
I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
We'll be here next week.
All right, that's a wrap.
See ya.
Welcome to another edition of the Sports Zone. I'm Windmill. Alongside me, as usual, is Lars.
Hey, everybody.
Back from his vacation is the Ledge.
Back here.
Nice tan, Vic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have fun while you were gone?
Not a bad time at all.
You want to tell us a little about it?
Well, I'll tell you, those people out in Colorado, they're really getting into it out there. Seems like everywhere you go, they're wearing Rocky Mania out there, and unbelievable team that's almost 37 games out of first place. How everybody is just worshiping this team. It doesn't matter where you go, you'll see pennants in any establishment. Gives you the whole lineup and the schedule, when they play on the road, when they're on TV, what channel they're on. I mean, you can't miss these guys. They even have on the buses everywhere. And they've won about 35 games here, I think. They're not that great. But it's kind of interesting going there and seeing how when a team comes out the first year in expansion, they're getting 5 million fans. And they're averaging about 60,000 a night, and they can't even play the game. They say they're called the Colorado Rookies out there. So.
Do you think it's a mistake for them to only be building a 48,000-seat stadium when they're filling 72,000 a night?
Definitely. Because see, Denver with the outskirts out there, you have Boulder, Colorado, only 50 miles away. Colorado Springs has over 300,000 people there. I mean, they have so many fans within 1 hour from there that it's really unreal how many fans they really do attract.
Well, it is kind of a small stadium, but hey, this is the first time that a baseball team's going to draw over 5 million. I mean, they've had runs at 3 and they've had runs at 4. Toronto, Twins went over 3. Toronto went over 4. They're not going to sell out every game. 50,000, that's plenty.
They've been ready for the franchise for over 20 years. Colorado has been preparing for this, so you better believe they're going to draw fans.
But yeah, if they keep losing, you'll see attendance down to 20,000. They're not going to draft 5 million next year or the following. This is a peak.
Well, what they say out in Colorado is they're starting to spend a little more money on getting some free agents because the fans are taking care of them. So they can go and get a few decent pitchers and stuff. That's really where their weak spot is. They're giving them 6-7 runs a game. I mean, they don't have that type of an offense to warrant giving up 6-7 runs. So they're going to really have to.
They beat the Padres.
Yeah, they broke a 13-game losing skid on Sunday, so, at least hopefully for their fans, you don't want to see any team do that bad. You'd like to see them, hopefully go 400, 450 the rest of the way, because I don't think they can play 500 ball yet, but at least if they could win 65, 70 games, they'd be respectable. I don't know.
What do you think of Don Baylor? You got to like Don Baylor, though. He's doing a good job.
Don Baylor's doing a really good job. I watched a game Colorado playing Cincinnati on the way back when I stopped in Nebraska, and they were up 4-3, and then he pulls the pitcher and puts another guy, and they tie the game, and they lose the next innings. And then, of course, everybody starts second-guessing, just like the Tom Kelly thing.
Yeah, sounds like TK.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, how about Andres Galarraga, too? That Don Baylor's really done a lot for him this year.
Yeah, well, I think it just was one of those things where once in a while a player in any sport, whether it's football, baseball, will change the scenery, and they're almost like they're reborn for a year or two. Maybe they had a problem with management. Maybe they had a problem with the general manager, just whoever on the team, they had a problem with them.
It changed their attitude, and a real good example is Fred McGriff. I mean, McGriff, when he got traded from Toronto 4 or 5 years ago, came on like gangbusters. And the same thing is happening now. He's been reborn with Atlanta. He had 5 or 6 home runs just to start out in, 7 games?
Yeah, in 7 games. He just tore it up. And Atlanta, unfortunately, is... in my opinion, I think they're too far out. I don't think that, even with their ace pitching staff they have, I don't think they can, I don't think they get the job done personally.
Well, let's talk about the races. What do you see coming down to the wire? We got about 9 weeks left here in the season.
Well, there's no question that the 2 NL races kind of look like St. Louis can't catch them, and it kind of looks like Atlanta can't catch them either. So you're going to have Philadelphia and San Fran taking over. Now, when you get into the American League East, that's probably the best division we have right now. We have 4 teams within 1 game.
Yankees are going to do it.
And this is going to be kind of one of the best parts of Sports Zone, because this is one thing I do not agree on. The Toronto Blue Jays should win the division, and if the Toronto Blue Jays do not win the division, it will be the Boston Red Sox. The reason is they play last 31 of 50 games at home. Their last 3 series are against the Tigers, the Twins, and the Brewers at home. So they're going to have such a good insight there with having the Rocket, Roger Clemens, on the mound, being back at Fenway, them playing the best ball.
Viola.
There's no way that Baltimore or New York win that division. You're hearing it right now in early August. It's good. I personally think that Toronto can get the job done. But if they cannot get the job done, it's going to be the Red Sox. Because there's just no way. Well, the Tigers are too far back, and I don't think they have enough pitching to do it. But Baltimore, they won't get the job done, and the Yankees just don't have it.
It's the Yankees. It's the Yankees or Baltimore. And the Yankees will be there because they have the strongest pitching staff in the East.
Well, what do you think, Lars?
I could care less about the American League East.
You don't care, huh? Well, some people up there
I'll say this. It's got to be Toronto because they've got everybody. They've got all the horses.
Well, and plus they needed to get Ricky Henderson.
They got Ricky.
Well, they're going to make a run for it because Henderson won't be there next year. They're going to lose a lot of players this offseason. There's no way you can afford to pay those guys and hold them as long as Toronto's been holding them.
Absolutely. The same thing happened with the Twins 2 years ago.
But it's almost like a horse race, and if you were at Canterbury Downs betting on the Daily Double, you have to take Toronto and you have to take Boston. They're just the best.
You don't have to take anybody.
Well, if you're going to take
I'm taking New York.
Well, you got third place then.
Hey, you talk about the Yankees.
You got third place then.
Well, how about George Steinbrenner? You haven't heard a word from him since he came back. He had this big hoopla when he came back this year, and you haven't heard from him. That's kind
Well, if you haven't heard from George, then how come they're up and right around
one game out?
three
I'm
games
just saying
out?
that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice coming from New York because Steinbrenner's always got his hands in it. I like Steinbrenner, but I don't like the way he does business on a lot of
I think it's his impact that has that team up where they are because he's got them believing they're the Yankees of the old. You got a great staff. You got Jimmy Key, Paul Abbott. They went out and got Ossenmacher in the trade. They gave away Habian. I don't agree with that.
They're an okay team, but they're going to finish third place.
I'd like to see Mattingly make it in. I mean,
make it into what?
make it into at least the playoffs, World Series. I mean, the guy.
Well, not this year.
I agree with you though, but I would like to see.
Well, what about the mild West?
Well, there you really have to take a serious look at Texas. Sometimes people do think that sports is somewhat rigged.
You in Texas. Every year, you in Texas.
Well, this year, though, it's
Texas
because
has got all the guns.
they have the guns, number one. And number two, it's almost like it's a sending away party for Nolan Ryan. It's almost like it's rigged. And you got to right now take a real hard look at Texas. They won again on Sunday. They're still 3.5 games out. There's about 50 games to go in 9 weeks. I mean, 3 games is nothing. They're in it. When you have Gonzalez, Franco, Rafael Palmeiro, I mean, they have a good lineup. Dean Palmer, I mean,
Pudge.
They have enough guys to get the Rodriguez, the catcher. I mean,
That's Pudge.
There's only one Pudge, and that's Carlton.
Now Carlton.
Well, that's true, but
That's only one Pudge. I don't know why, but
But I really see Texas getting the job done. I do not see anybody. If you're a Royals fan out there, Kansas City is not.
Kansas City, I told you would win several weeks ago.
They went out.
wrong answer.
Kansas City went out and they went out. And
I like how you're agreeing with me too. I know that's kind of good.
The American League's worst. It doesn't matter because whoever comes out of the worst division
It won't be Toronto anyway, so who cares? But it's not going to be. The only team that could beat Texas is Chicago.
I'm glad you're back, Vic. We had a going week.
Kansas City went out and got Habian,
I don't
and they
care
went out and
who
they
they
got
got.
Stan Belinda. Those are two outstanding.
Remember what I said here in early August.
What the hell's his name? Has been?
This is the thing. This is the deal. Nolan Ryan's last year. You guys got to think. These guys are into ratings in sports.
2 or 3 more years.
That's all it is. It's a farewell tour, and they're going to promote it that he's in the playoffs.
Nolan pound on Ventura.
Yeah,
Especially when he
well,
starts off, yeah, no doubt.
the old cattle ranch are throwing 6 blows to the melon on old
He was
Ventura.
dogging that little bulldog out there. There's no, I mean, they're just pipes. That team has just got it all. Gonzalez.
So just remember, the teams in the American League are the T's: Texas, Toronto, okay, San Fran, Philadelphia.
Mind and word association.
And I see the Giants beating the Phillies in the playoffs, and I see Toronto coming back to the World Series.
I agree with Giants Phillies. The
He
Giants.
agrees with me.
Hey,
oh my God.
I like the Phillies. They're all a bunch of fat bastards anyway.
The Giants, though, they have manhandled the Phillies all year.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
and
the
with
Phillies
Barry
have won
U.S.
1 or
Bonds.
2 games with their U.S. Bonds. The guy
have too much.
is just too much.
MVP.
Manwaring, Williams, Will Clark. I mean, no.
Burkett pitching.
Yeah, no, the Phillies won't get the job done. Kruk will choke under pressure.
He'll choke on a hot dog if he chokes on anything.
They might do that.
I like that team, man.
He might be eating a hot dog while he's at that.
They're just a bunch of fat guys that can go out and pound it.
They go out and they have a great time. And that's the spirit of the sport. You got Kruk, you got Fergosi as a manager, you got the wild man Mitch Williams coming out of the bullpen.
Very unorthodox style, as I'm
Yeah,
saying.
very, but he gets the job done.
But on baseball, that's who we like, and I think that most people do agree that San Fran is probably the best team in the NL. It's kind of sad that Atlanta put this much time into their pitching staff and stuff, and they aren't going to get the job done. But there's no way they'll catch San Fran.
They got to hold that team together too. They got some unhappy people.
Well, when you get success, they go to 2 World Series in a row. They're kind of like the Buffalo Bills getting back to football. I mean, a team that has really done well in their conference but can't get the big pie. I mean, they get there to eat, but they don't get the job done. I mean,
they don't feast.
The Phillies will get there and feast this year.
You're saying the Phillies are going to get there?
No, they'll get. That should be a good game. I mean, Philadelphia's definitely got the power.
You sound like Clinton. You're kind of wavering. It's either this side or this side. You got to make a decision. Is it the Phillies or is it the Giants?
Don't even associate me with Clinton. Well, this ain't a political show, so let's go on.
All right. Okay, moving on to football next, or we can talk a little football. What do you think of the Vikes this week?
What is there to think? I don't think of the Vikings.
Okay, well, Windmill, you like
I like the Vikings.
Chucky Evans.
And you heard it here first on the Zone. 2 weeks ago I came here and we said, who do you like for running back? I said, Chuck Evans out of Clark College. Nobody had ever heard of him. Now everybody's waving the praise.
Well, I'm not jumping.
The guy's out of nowhere. 13 rushes, 78 yards, and a touchdown.
It's preseason.
That bandwagon's going to blow a wheel before the season starts. They're going to go with the
Vikings. Blow a clutch, too.
You betcha. Terry Allen already blew a wheel. I mean, Chuck Evans is next. This team has Roger Craig, who I dearly love. I think he's one of the greatest running backs of all time. Since college, I've followed this guy. But you have running back by committee. You have nobody.
Who's going to have the most yards in the Vikings as a rusher?
Yeah, you were making a prediction before we came on the show. I want to hear this.
I predict that there will not be a running back that gets over 600 yards this year.
And if there is, I'll tell you who it is.
Who is it?
It's going to be Robert Smith.
Robert Smith.
Robert Smith will have the most carries and the most yards in the team. That guy is very underrated. They're jumping on this bandwagon, this Evans guy. Hey, he maybe he's okay, and he went to the Marine. I mean, that doesn't make him a great football player. I mean, I'm not getting all excited about this guy. He's good. But you got to remember that Robert Smith played in the Big Ten against the likes of Michigan and stuff, and this guy has a good work ethic and smart kid. He's
a lot of good backs out of Ohio State. You got Keith Byers. Archie Griffin.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they come from a solid program. And
no, they will give the ball to Robert Smith, and it'll be the first time in 5 years they've had since Randall McDaniel had a good first-round pick, and he is a solid contender, and he's deserving of a first-round pick. He's
pretty outspoken about it, too. They interviewed him during the game this week, and if you notice, he was wearing his Beavis and Butthead T-shirt, which I thought was kind of funny.
Your favorite show?
Yeah, I mean, he's a normal guy.
Oh, what a great show.
Yeah, boy, that's a high one on my list.
I'll tell you, you don't ever watch that again. Just tune into the Sportszone every week, and you'll have your life.
You watch Beavis and Butthead, and then you turn to the Sportszone, because they're on right after each other. So anyway,
we have to have that association.
Our clientele that watches show is not going to watch that, so why do you watch it?
Shut up and go on.
I mean, that show is so stupid.
Hey, what do you think of McMahon?
I think that McMahon will play 6 games. I've said that. I tell you this, we're getting back to fantasy football now. Rich Gannon will be a better pick than Jim McMahon this year if you're talking fantasy football. Boy, I get some silence on this stuff there, didn't I? But, you know, he's injury prone. I like the guy. I think the Vikings would have a really good year if he played the whole year, but I don't honestly see that happening. You have to remember when you're drafting in these drafts, getting back to fantasy football, the position that's going to take the most abuse, as we talked earlier on the first show, was Dave Craig was the only guy to take every snap last year. So you have to start looking at some second-string quarterbacks.
By the way, that's the answer to the trivia question from 2 weeks ago. Nobody wrote in, but if you're at all curious, it was Dave Craig. Dave Craig took every snap for the Chiefs last year, and he was the only quarterback to do that for any NFL team. I really see Steve Bono having a great year, and unfortunately Steve Young was hurt this weekend and he broke his hand. I think
Steve Bono?
Yeah.
He won't even play.
Why not?
Steve Young's going to play the whole season for him.
Oh, no. I don't see that happening at all. I'll tell you this right now. Steve Young won't be in the home opener.
You're just full of predictions today.
Well, he's not going to be.
I disagree with you.
I agree with you.
They played 5 months.
They don't sign him in a $30 million
They played 5 months. Why would you take them? It's just throwing at you. Don't monkey with your hand.
Severity of it.
You don't monkey with your hand or your arm if you're a quarterback, especially in the first game. They're playing the Super Bowl. They're playing a home opener. One game, and it's at Pittsburgh. It's a home opener. Road opener.
Okay.
Oh, Steve Bono, they won 27-0 the other day.
Wow, that was a walk. I mean, that was not even a challenge. They played the Raiders.
Well, the Raiders beat Green Bay. That was supposed to be a good team.
Well, yeah, I'm not a Green Bay fan. A Packer backer.
So I mean, the Raiders actually have a pretty decent team. They played Green Bay and didn't give up a touchdown to them. Okay, beat them 19-3. Now they can't even score against 49ers. You're saying they're not any good?
The Raiders?
Yeah.
Or are you talking the Raiders or the Niners?
I'm talking both teams. They're both obviously good teams. If the Raiders can hold Green Bay to not score.
It's even stupid to speculate on it.
But I'm telling you right now that Steve Bono will give the home opener, number one, and number two. You know, sometimes injuries are like plane crash. They come in threes. And
word associations. Where do we go? Hey, we're at the mall 2 weeks ago. Hey, you're at the mall. There's 10 guys that don't make the same as you do. What? Go ahead.
Well, there aren't.
Go ahead.
But you know, this is the thing. Steve Bono will give the home opener. There's no way Eddie DeBartolo and those guys are going to go out there and risk he's a franchise player. Why would you, if you were running the show, would you risk that for one stupid game when you're going to play 17 more in the playoffs?
Plus have 2 byes.
That's dumb.
Okay.
I mean, you look in these papers, well, he may miss the game. He's going to miss the game. That's...
Paper today said he'd probably play the home opener.
Well, I'm telling you right. Oh, home opener, that may be true, but
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use the word home. They said, I believe he said he's going to pay.
I'm telling you right now, it's not going to happen, so don't even worry.
So what was the score of that game anyway? 27?
27-0. Waters played a little, Lee played a
Waters
little.
got a touchdown, Rice got a touchdown too.
Well, Jerry Rice is...
He's automatic. He's going to score.
And that's why Steve Bono will start. All you got to do is the guy will get open, you have Brent Jones. Is Sherrard still playing there?
Sherrard went to New York.
Yeah, he's gone.
Giants?
Giants.
Happened gone probably. Or maybe before I went.
Happened before the season got underway.
Okay, well, it happened before I read about it.
Like during the drafts.
Hey, we can't expect you to know everything. Just think you do.
Well, got to do that once in a while, though. Got to have some confidence, you know.
How about that Vikings game? Did we ever give a score on that?
It was 20-6.
20-6.
They blocked the extra point.
And that was the Holmes that blocked that too, the Gopher.
Yeah.
They had 67,000 people at that game.
That was the biggest crowd ever.
For that.
And they had the same decibel level through the whole game.
Well, they
It's
were
just
more
like they're
excited
watching a soccer match.
Well, they were more excited watching the cheerleaders, they said. They were responding more to the cheerleaders than they did the action in the game. That's a cool stadium, though. I've been there. I went with Victor's brother one year, and we were over there and walked into that stadium. And it's really impressive, but they were saying that they really don't, the Germans don't like to associate with that stadium because of who built it. But it's a beautiful stadium. It's huge, and then it's got the track around it, so it makes it look that much bigger.